You see this? This is an iPad Pro that I bought a couple months ago. I used up all my savings that I got for the last year because I'm dumb. I mean, I already have an iPad mini. And I'm telling you all this because all the opinions in this video are of course my own and are dumb. I hope you all enjoy the video. The year is 1994, and after making primarily sports games for the first 6 years of their existence, Bethesda launches its first attempt at its own IP. The game, titled Elder Scrolls Arena, wasn't even meant to be an RPG, and it only shipped about 20,000 units, after Bethesda missed their goal of Christmas 1993. Surprise, surprise, even from the beginning, Bethesda couldn't get their shit out on time. No one could have guessed this game would go on to spawn one of the most successful series in all of video games, with 4 direct sequels, expansion packs, MMOs, and even an online card game, similar to Magic the Gathering or Pokemon, although it is very different from those two. While many of these games were successful in their own right, it was 2011's Skyrim for the PS3, Xbox 360, and Windows that shot Bethesda into the stratosphere, making them a household name, at least in the household of capital G gamers, with their patented Monster energy drinks and Cheeto-encrusted keyboards. The game wasn't just a success monetarily though, it also received glowing reviews across the board, even on PS3 where it infamously ran like diarrhea for many players. Actually, diarrhea probably isn't the best description for it. It would actually be more accurate to say it ran like constipation. But, like I said, this game took Bethesda to new heights that even the likes of the mighty Fallout 3 hadn't reached. In fact, only a month after release, Bethesda had shipped 10 million units, which, mind you, isn't the exact same thing as sold copies, but it is pretty close and damn impressive. One of the biggest signs of success is Steam concurrent players, and on release day, over 230,000 players were playing concurrently. To compare that to a modern game, at the time of recording, Helldivers has 125,000 plus concurrents. So, after all was said and done, Skyrim sold an astounding 60 million plus copies. And like I said, it wasn't only a success financially, but critically as well, with outlets like GameSpot, IGN, and others giving it a near perfect score. So, after this amazing success, what would Bethesda follow it up with? Before we get into that, let's talk about another company. One that at the time of Skyrim hadn't quite had their day in the sun. Of course, the developer I'm talking about is the Polish studio CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red was actually founded in 1994, the same year the first Elder Scrolls game came out. Although they weren't really a video game maker, both founders actually started out selling games, although not completely above board. And they would eventually go on to sell CD-ROMs, Western games, and they would even go on to make their own online storefront called GOG, or Good Old Games. Then, after over 10 years of selling other people's games, CD Projekt decided it was time to make their own. They took code from a canceled Dark Alliance game that they owned, and after a few years of work, in 2007, The Witcher, based on the books of the same name, was released to positive reviews. Although sales were nowhere near the likes of Skyrim, it sold well enough that a sequel was greenlit. A few years and their very own Red Engine later, The Witcher 2 Assassin of Kings was released again to generally positive reviews. However, it would not be until 2015's The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's release that CD Projekt would hit the mainstream. That was when the comparisons of CD Projekt and Bethesda really began. 2 huge games, Fallout 4 for Bethesda and The Witcher 3 for CD Projekt Red, released in the same year. Fallout 4 definitely got its flowers, at least with the critics, with an 87 on Metacritic, not so much with the audience, with a 67. I personally feel in the middle, somewhere, maybe an 8 or so. while I would put The Witcher 3 a fair bit higher, probably in the 9s or more. Although it's been years since I played either one, so I'm not sure how I'd feel about them nowadays. So, how do I plan on comparing these two companies? Well, clearly I can't or won't play all their games until completion. I'll be putting hundreds of hours into this video before I even begin to write. So I think what I'm going to do is play a few hours at the minimum of The Witcher 3, Starfield, Skyrim, and Cyberpunk. I might keep track, I'm not sure, but anything other than a few hours is just going to be gravy. Also, before you comment, I know these games have some big differences, and this isn't a perfect comparison. People have been comparing these games for years, and for good reasons. Of course, they're all Western RPGs, but it goes deeper than that. Skyrim and The Witcher 3 are fantasy-based games with many systems and side quests that you can get lost in. Starfield and Cyberpunk are even more similar. They're both first-person Western RPGs with a sci-fi setting where, again, there are a huge amount of side quests. So, with all that being said, let's talk about Skyrim.
It dawns in fire.
The first thing I noticed about Skyrim, or at least the version I played on Game Pass, was there didn't seem to be any easy way to play on mouse and keyboard. Some of the keys work sometimes, but the mouse doesn't seem to work at all outside of the scroll wheel. There also doesn't seem to be any way to remap the controls either. Although, as we've established, I've been known to be an idiot. And as I was writing this, I figured out how to change the controls. So, confirmed, I'm an idiot. Although, the mouse is still kind of useless. So, I guess I'll just use a controller for the first person game. Gross. Edit. You can actually play this game in third person. Now, to say Skyrim has a memorable introduction is an understatement. You're dropped into this strange place you know nothing about, and before you can do anything, you've already been sentenced to death. Before you can even wrap your head around that, you're inadvertently saved by a dragon who you then have to escape from. I played a lot of games since Skyrim, and not many have an opening that compares to this. Hell, I still remembered it all these years later, and I've only played it once. Of course, before all this, you get to create your character, which at the time, at least I thought, was pretty advanced, even though I really had no idea, and honestly still don't. It might be good, I don't know. So, surprise, I made my boring human and went on my way. Immediately, I remembered how much you can pick up in this game. Obviously, weapons and gear, but completely useless things as well, like cups and buckets. In The Witcher, sure, there's a lot to pick up, but Skyrim takes it to a different level. Also, it's pretty obvious right off the bat that the combat was definitely not the main focus of this game. But even The Witcher's, which isn't great, is better than this. Which sucks because, in my eyes, gameplay is the most important thing, and combat is obviously a big part of that. Of course, mediocre combat can be overcome by a compelling world, great characters, and an amazing story, among other things. First off, the visuals, from what I assume are some sort of remastered version, hold up pretty well, especially the environments with all the trees and other vegetation. As I went on playing, I have to say, even though I had only been playing for a couple of hours, I was already starting to get bored. I was definitely looking forward to playing Skyrim and The Witcher than playing Skyrim. Maybe it was the combat, maybe it was because it was the beginning of the game, which I had played through more than once. Regardless, I wanted to put in a little bit more time before I made any judgments. First of all, why the hell is the jump button Y? I know that this is in other Bethesda games, but still, I just don't understand this. I've never understood it. And secondly, I have to say, on my way to Whiterun and other places, again, I just kept getting bored. There just didn't seem to be anything to do between locations. Even though I know there were, I was just not seeing any. There were no minigames, no quests, no puzzles, no dungeons, at least that I can find. Maybe it was because I didn't have my trusted horse Roach from The Witcher 3 to get me from place to place quickly, and maybe The Witcher 3 would be more like this if I didn't have him and I just didn't notice it. So, it's back to walking up mountains, and I got bored again. But before I talk about something else, I do have a couple more thoughts on Skyrim. First of all, I'm not sure how, but at some point during my playthrough, my camera switched to third person, and I'm not sure how to change it back. I'm sure I could easily figure this out, but I didn't mind, especially since I was playing on controller. Secondly, I would also say that I had some trouble getting from place to place, and not just because you don't have a horse. Maybe it's because there's so many mountains to go around, or maybe the game design has changed, but I also remember having this problem in 2011. I also only played for a few hours because, again, I got so bored, it felt like all I was doing was walking. I definitely just don't remember walking so much from place to place. Maybe it gets better as you go, but for now, I'm moving on. So, moving from one fantasy RPG to another, The Witcher 3. I remember it took me so many attempts to get through this game for the first time. I'm not sure why, but I would always quit before I found Yennefer, which is like the first main quest. However, after several attempts, I did finish it and I absolutely loved it. The stories were awesome, the characters were memorable, and the lore was unique. However, that was the first and only time I've ever beaten it, and that was years ago. So again, I'm going to play some more and compare it to my first playthrough as well as Skyrim. After starting the game, one thing that was very different from Skyrim was the opening. Again, in Skyrim, you're set to be executed and then are attacked by a dragon. In The Witcher 3, you open on a peaceful bath scene followed by minutes of cutscenes and an in-depth tutorial followed by more cutscenes. And might I say, this game still looks fantastic. It hasn't been remastered like Skyrim, but it still looks amazing. But it's still been a decade since its release. The combat is also somewhat better than Skyrim, although that's not saying much. Having Roach to ride around makes traveling much easier in these huge worlds. I didn't mention it earlier, but I actually did find a horse in Skyrim, but it was just so slow, and also I may or may have not accidentally killed it falling off a mountain. Another thing that was apparent right away is how these games handle their stories. The Witcher 3, right off the bat, you're in the world with the character backgrounds and lore and more. I'm not sure if the first two Witcher games were like that because I've never played them. Although I do own 1 and 2, but then I heard that they were remaking them, so I decided to wait for that. Contradicting this, Skyrim doesn't give you the world history or geopolitics. It certainly doesn't give you character or any lore. You are the lore in Skyrim. In The Witcher 3, you play as Geralt of Rivia, with all the baggage that comes with that. He's an established character from 2 earlier games, whereas in Skyrim, you are you. Your history is what you make of it, and you can engage in the world to whatever degree suits you. But that's what makes The Witcher and Skyrim. In The Witcher 3, you follow hyper-curated adventures, and in Skyrim, you make your own. You're free to like Skyrim more, and you would be far from alone, but I just think that the game design lacks as much substance as something like The Witcher 3. Although, to be fair to Skyrim, I was always more of a Fallout guy, which is also far from perfect, and Fallout 4 itself has plenty of its own problems too. None of this is helped by the Bethesda games always seem to run. I know The Witcher 3 had its problems, but Skyrim on PS3 was damn near unplayable for many people. I remember when Starfield was announced, I was curious as to whether or not Bethesda would actually address any of these issues. And speaking of Starfield launched on September the 3rd of 2023 to fairly positive reviews. It wasn't a huge accomplishment critically, but it ended up somewhere around the low 80s on Metacritic. It's kind of a letdown because many people thought that this was going to be the game to prove that Xbox still has it, the game that would prove Game Pass is worth it, and the game to prove that Bethesda was worth all that money. It was their first new IP in decades, and to many people it was just kind of like, meh. Now, Starfield is the only game on this list that I hadn't put more than a couple hours into beforehand. I put a little time into it when it released, but that's it. So, just like with Skyrim, I fired up Game Pass and downloaded it to my PC. This isn't a huge deal, but one of the first things that I noticed when I launched the game is it took well over a minute to open. Now, I don't know if this is Starfield, Game Pass, or my PC. It's, of course, like I said, not deal-breaking, but it might start to get annoying if you play the game enough. Now, I decided to start a new playthrough since it had been so long since I played it, and I only had a couple hours in anyway. So, starting out, Starfield did not feel great. When I tried to start a new game, the screen completely froze for a while. However, after a couple minutes, it let me in. Then, after playing for a few minutes, the game started to freeze again, but thankfully that worked itself out too. Aside from that, there were a few small glitches here and there, but I only played the game for a relatively short amount of time, so take that as you will. Also, the opening of Starfield is not nearly as epic as Skyrim's, but again, that's not a big deal. This could change, but in the beginning, while I was playing Starfield, I couldn't help but thinking, I wish I was playing The Outer Worlds, another space RPG by developer Obsidian, who Microsoft also owned, alongside Bethesda. They also made 2010's Fallout New Vegas, which many consider to be the best Fallout. Okay, I want to address something real quick, and this is not just for Starfield. Why do so many NPCs in so many games walk so damn slow? These characters are supposed to be leading you somewhere. They're walking like the destination is the gas chambers. I just had to get that off my chest. So, after playing the game for a little while, you get access to a spaceship so you can explore space, which is cool and all, but I might just be too dumb for this. Jokes aside, I don't know why, but Bethesda decided to make flying so complicated. Feels like baby's first flight simulator or something. Also, this is probably a me thing, but the flying in Starfield made me sick. All of this combined, as well as mediocre ship combat, made one of the game's core features very frustrating to me. However, I made my way down to the planet for my next mission, which started to have the same problems as Skyrim. Sure, the gunplay and missions were fun enough once you get to them, but the spaces between them were so barren. Then, after playing for a while, I made my way back into the ship and back to space, and honestly quit because I hated everything about this ship. I really wanted to like Starfield. I really wanted to like Skyrim. Bethesda made games that I loved. But it's been over 10 years and so much has remained stagnant. Pretty but lifeless worlds you have to walk through for minutes upon minutes before you finally get to an NPC who stands way too close to you another mission where you have to walk slowly towards. Now that's enough of that. And finally we have CD Projekt Red's newish kid on the block, Cyberpunk 2077. Now, of course, we have to address the elephant in the room. At launch, Cyberpunk 2077 was in absolute pitiful shape. Crashes, a broken police system, broken missions, and much were absolutely everywhere. I, being my dumbass, decided to buy it on release. I mean, The Witcher 3 was amazing. What could go wrong? Everything. Everything can go wrong. After playing for a while, one of my missions broke and I just had enough. I decided to delete the game and come back when CD Projekt actually finished their game. I'm not sure how long it took, albeit months or years, but eventually, Cyberpunk was mostly finished. It was after that I finally decided to hop back in, and I fell in love. The world, the characters, the story, all were so believable. Getting around was mostly fast and the fluid, especially after they fixed these driving mechanics. It was actually on par with The Witcher 3 in many ways. That's what CD Projekt does so well. The world and those who live in it. It's just teeming with life. Compared to Skyrim and Starfield, which felt like I was taking too long to get to things I didn't want to do. And Cyberpunk actually has decent combat as well. Well, honestly, I think that's about as much as I can say on the subject. I was going to play Phantom Liberty and tell you my thoughts on that, but nothing is really going to change. It's just going to be more the same takes. As far as I can tell, the DLC is amazing and everyone loves it. I am going to play it soon, and maybe I can tell my thoughts on them. But until then, how do you feel about the two companies? Your thoughts in the comments below. Also, Make sure to like and subscribe. I hope everyone has a great day, and I will see you guys next time.